Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion video. So this is going to be speculation ahead of Chapter 6, which I believe is coming out January 18th. So it's actually coming out about 2 days earlier than it typically does. So we're under 2 weeks away from the chapter. So yeah, what this will be, as ever, it'll be kind of extra discussion on Chapter 5 and what we learned, as well as some attempted speculation about what we will see in Chapter 6. So the details, of course, are Chapter 6. That means it's going to be the second chapter in 2 Blue Vortex Volume 2. So it's going to be one of these kind of middle chapters where obviously we'll have Chapter 7 and then Chapter 8 will be the volume ending chapter for Volume 2. So that probably means like it's not maybe going to be like the most absolutely incredible bombastic chapter, but I still think it should be pretty good because Chapter 5, in my opinion, actually really delivered, and sometimes the volume starting chapters can be a little bit of a struggle, but they actually got it, I think, right this time out. So let's get into this. So one of the big things, of course, in Chapter 5 was, of course, the reintroduction of Amado. We'd been waiting a while for this because he was kind of a little bit missing right at the end of Boruto, and then we hadn't seen him up until last chapter in 2 Blue Vortex. So finally they addressed the whole situation, confirming a lot of the details that we wanted to know about this. Has he been affected by the switcheroo? Yes, but he is using his own sort of scientific knowledge, his own sort of logical intelligence abilities to be able to sort of see through it. And he now realizes that, oh, my memories must have been altered because everything points to the fact that what I believe to be true is not actually true, because one of the most important things in his life, the most important thing, is trying to get his daughter Akebi back. So they finally reference this situation again, and now he knows that Kawaki is actually the one that he needs to revive Akebi, not Boruto, which would be the case if he's fully affected by the switch. That everyone views Boruto as basically being Kawaki, and Kawaki is actually the one who has the Akebi data in his karma mark. But Amado can see, just from his own handiwork, that, hey, I did that. I know that that is what I did. No one can explain what happened with Kawaki, why he has been altered and stuff like this, but I know that it had to have been me. So that is the situation. So what are we doing here? Why are we reintroducing this again? Because one of the big questions, I'll get to it straight away here, is they're bringing it up again, but when's it actually going to happen? When are we going to attempt the revival of Akebi? And if we do try it, is it going to go as smoothly as Amado actually states it will? Because it's a bit of a weird, complicated situation where, like, Amado's going to create a cloned body of Akebi, but the reason it didn't work before is because effectively what he's trying to do is effectively a godlike thing, kind of revive someone from the dead, which is only possible with the powers of a god, which is what the karma mark actually is. So the question here is this actually a possibility to, if you implant your karma, but the karma has someone else's data in it, is that just going to work and do what he expects it to do, and that just be that his daughter is back? An obvious question about this is that, does that make her then an Otsutsuki? But the extracted data from the karma is going to just be a normal person, but because it's done through a karma, does it work that way? I assume this is where, like, Amado and the whole idea of, like, he knows so much about how these abilities work, and the fact that he's able to sort of like engineer them in different ways and give them to people. It is a crazy thing that exists, that like the power that caused the switcheroo to happen, Amado put that in Ada. Like that's one of the craziest kind of things that exists in the show, that is something that has happened. So We'll have to wait and see what happens here, because I would like to see the character of Akebi and see what happens here. And does this just solve everything for Amado, or does this kind of create a kind of new kind of threat, or whatever? There's some interesting kind of stuff going on here. There's still a lot about Amado I think we definitely do want to know about. But with regards to the whole, like, wait, why is Amado able to see through it? Because one thing they do is they sort of present the idea that just pure logic and evidence doesn't seem to work to sort of convince people that their memories are wrong. Because people have been basically completely dismissing the whole Boruto family photo thing. That it seems like Sarada has shown that to multiple people, that, hey, your memories are wrong. Look at this family photo. Boruto is Naruto's son, not Kawaki. Explain this picture. It doesn't work on anyone. And like we've been presented before, the ability seems to course correct people back to, feeling that the switch is actually the truth. Whereas they seem to actually be going for the idea that deep care, heavy emotion about something, this is what can cause real doubt to come in about your own kind of memories and basically fighting through the switcheroo. So stuff like, obviously, Sasuke trusting Sarada after seeing the emotion of Sarada. Emotion enough to unlock the Mangekyo Sharingan. Something like Himawari believing in Boruto. We haven't come back to this in quite a while, but the fact that she still has hope, even though everyone is saying, like, you're kind of crazy for still kind of having any care for him. And then, of course, this reveal, Amado's plan to save his daughter. That, is it just about, like, he is so intelligent that he's been able to figure this out? Or is it because his plan in particular is emotionally important to him, because this is the plan, this sequence of things, this is what will lead to him getting his daughter back. So him noticing an issue with them is of course going to make him deeply question things, because there's so much riding on these details. Whereas some random person in the village just seeing the Boruto's picture, it's like, okay, but it doesn't really affect them because it's not related to their life, that sort of thing. Is that what we're going for here? An interesting one. And we'll touch on this a little bit later on when we address another topic. But let's move on. This is probably the big thing, especially talking about chapter 6. Boruto's back in the village. It literally says in the last chapter he is home. But is he just going to be allowed to stay just because he says he's home? Based on what we saw before and in previous chapters, there's a lot of discussion between the likes of Shikamaru and Sarada, even Kawaki, about, like, he was in the village, but now people are like, but he did help us with code, so maybe we can trust him, and what way are we actually going to do this? I think the idea that they're going to go for is that because there is this new group of villains out there that is so threatening, even beyond the threat of, like, code and stuff like that, I think he's going to be allowed to stay, since he seems to know some stuff about what's actually going on. They're going to need Boruto's help to deal with these clones. If the village already is struggling a bit with just code and his army, now the fact that there are 4 new really powerful villains, that creates an even kind of worse situation. So this is obviously going to create a lot of tension and debate. Kawaki, I think for sure, is not going to like this, but he is not the leader of the village. It is Shikamaru. So Kawaki can disagree with this all he wants, but if Shikamaru says yes, that's the way it's actually going to go down. Now we'll see exactly what way they do this. Maybe Kawaki eventually gets convinced that, like, actually, Boruto being here gives me more of an opportunity to kill him in secret or whatever. We'll see what exactly they do there. But either way, I think the idea of switching things up so that instead of, like, the first couple of chapters, it's about Boruto hovering in and around the village and then maybe coming in occasionally. The idea that he's just now back in the village is going to create a bit of a different status quo for the series that will, I think, make it a bit more interesting. It gives the series a bit of stability. while still creating like all of these new dynamics where it's going to be Boruto interacting with all these characters who used to be his friends, but they now treat him as if he was Kawaki. And that's going to be crazy for, Boruto, Sumire, and Sarada especially to deal with, because they know the truth, but Boruto just has to accept that this is a situation until they fix things. So obviously the new villains need to be dealt with before addressing, I suppose, the other situations that we were kind of waiting for before these new elements came into play. Boruto Kawaki, that Boruto has to basically knock some sense into Kawaki at some point. Ada wants him to do this, and eventually finding some way to reverse the switch even happening in the first place, and what exactly that means for the series. That's going to be an interesting one. So yeah, Boruto being openly in the village is going to allow for more regular interactions with Sarada, of course, Sumire, Amado. I'm assuming the reason they introduced him is because he's going to come into play a bit more. And also Himawari. Like, that will be a super interesting one, of Himawari seeing Boruto kind of back in the village. What way will that go? Especially with regards to the whole thing we were discussing up here of like, is this going to create further doubt for her about the actual details of the situation? Because again, remember, we've already sort of set the stage of like a chapter or two ago, Kawaki's poor treatment of like Mitsuki is causing Mitsuki to maybe question some things, because Kawaki isn't playing his role properly. It is playing and having an impact, because like to Mitsuki, Boruto is like one of the most important people in his life. So that person being completely different, he's going to feel something is up. That's a key point, obviously. Then we probably have to address this. What about Kashin Koji? So we got like half of the backstory. We got the what happened to Sasuke backstory. How did Boruto sort of end up on his own? But we still do need to see, like, wait, where does Kashin Koji come into play? When did Boruto and Kashin Koji meet? What has Koji been up to all of this time? And what's he up to now? Because it felt like his entire life, his entire existence was about defeating Ishiki. Now that that's done, what's he up to? He obviously wants to protect the world in some way, but what more than that? And what is the nature of the dynamic between Boruto and Kashin Koji? That's an interesting one, because I'm guessing like Koji is affected by what happened as well. That's an interesting point as well, or how does that work? Interesting things to address. I'll bring this up here just because I feel it kind of has to be brought up. Shipping. I think very clearly there is at least a fragment of romantic kind of shipping stuff in at least the final scene of chapter 5. The fact that it is Sarada hugging Boruto, the fact that they kind of linger on Sumire's kind of reaction watching it for like a page or two, and we sort of know she has a crush on Boruto. It is present there, I think, in the material, that there is a little bit of a dynamic there, where has Sarada as maybe openly as maybe you would want to admit it if she has feelings for Boruto. We're not really sure. It feels a little bit clearer from Sumire, especially if you watch like the anime. But what exact direction are we going in with this? Because we do still need to figure out why the switch didn't actually work on Sumire and Sarada. Why were they unaffected by it at all? We know certain theories don't seem to be the case. The strong bloodline theory about how because Sarada is an Uchiha and there's a strong kind of connection to like Otsutsuki kind of there, maybe that's why. But Sasuke was affected, so that seems to kind of rule that out. Sumire, you would also say, has sort of a bloodline connection as well with the whole Nue thing, if you get into that complicated situation, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Amado's closeness to like the power didn't seem to save him. His supreme knowledge, his kind of engineering abilities, that like he gave Ada that power, that didn't seem to cause him to be immune to it in some way. So that gets to the idea, why are they both immune, Sarada and Sumire? The only remaining theory I've seen like anyone bring up to any sort of like regular degree is the whole love can't be changed theory. That because there's an attraction, there is potentially love for Sarada and Sumire towards Boruto, that because the omnipotence is trying to swap basically where that love would be directed, that if they both love Boruto and the switch worked, they would then be loving Kawaki. They seem to potentially be going for the idea that you can't change such a strong feeling like this to be that kind of clear. That potentially is also why, like, say, with Himawari, there's doubt straight away in place, because it's this kind of family situation. And I think this is why it sort of, in a way, is helped by the fact that, like, say, Kawaki doesn't have parents, and Boruto's parents are both out of the picture for now. But we'll address that a little bit, I suppose, later on. Whereas the only kind of family properly in play is Boruto and Himawari. So that will be interesting to see her reaction to Boruto, given that we know she is impacted by the switch, but is having doubts herself already. But there's also the added element of she already views it as if she basically has two brothers. So that's an interesting one. But this is, I think, a somewhat still valid theory, I think. And especially with Ada, who is the character whose kind of plot points is effectively about the idea of kind of true love, basically. That's what she would like to have but can't have because of her abilities, and that's why there are only like a few potential candidates for that. It kind of feels interesting that somehow the two powers kind of cross in a way, in a little bit, and so because she values the idea of real love, one caveat to how it affects people is that it doesn't impact their like love for other people. Now, because of the way the swap works, of course, it doesn't really impact that many people, I suppose, to where this really kind of comes into play. So outside of just Ada walks past, characters will obviously be drawn towards her. It's not like this is getting in the way of, like, this character now doesn't care about a character they were in love with before, but do care about someone else. There's an interesting kind of dynamic going on there. But if you do have a better theory than any of this stuff, definitely let me know below, because I haven't really seen another strong theory about this. Then we get into the villains, because this is probably the core of what made the last chapter super interesting, which was they really got into the heart of what's going on here with these villains and gave us a little bit of an insight into what they're about. So let's go through them. So we got the Bug, the one based off Bug, the Bug Divine Tree. He's the only one we didn't get the new name of, because the other ones do have actual names, as we'll get to. This one has chosen Ada as his target. Based on the others, it seems to be the case that they are drawn to their particular chosen target based on the feelings/connections of the person that they are based on. So this one, of course, based on Bug. Bug is trapped in the tree. That's why this one looks like Bug. Now, based on everything else, the others choose their targets based on a personal connection of the original with this particular character. What's Bug's strong connection to Ada? Because we know very little about Bug, like real kind of non-entity of a character to a certain degree. Is this going to be an opportunity to delve into that kind of through this character? Interestingly, he was the one kind of like guarding Ada for a long time, and before obviously like she was kind of woken up. So because of that, Bug might have this actual very strong attachment, connection, maybe actual feelings for her. It depends on what they go with this. I don't think we know enough to maybe properly speculate in the right direction, but because of that, there seems to be some sort of connection that Bug is maybe obsessed with Ada in some way. This is definitely the one of the four that needs the most development. You would say the leader guy also needs a bit more, but at least that one feels like we have a clear avenue of speculation before we get the details. This one just feels like, okay, one based on Bug, the only connection really is to Ada. And through that, I suppose it brings Demon into play, because if there is going to be a big fight, Demon is going to be the one to fight for his sister, because Ada has said she isn't really a fighter. So that's that whole situation. And it is noted, like they note that, like, oh, the Senrigan, you're actually targeting her. Interesting. So that's going to be a bit of an interesting one. The next character here, let me just separate this a bit. So yeah, Matsuri, who is the Moegi Divine Tree character. So she has chosen Konohamaru as her target. She hasn't specifically targeted Ino Shikacho, though with her they do particularly note that she can like feel the emotions of Ino Shikacho. Now I think that's because there seems to be a connection directly from the Divine Tree character back to where the tree actually is, and I think she can sense their feelings because they are literally there next to the tree interacting with what's going on. So it obviously makes sense that they're each targeting an individual, and it would be odd to just choose one of Ino Shikacho, and then of her own 3-man team. Konohamaru is a million times more interesting than Udon. I still think they could use Udon at some point. Like, it would make sense just if you actually are going to use this as an opportunity to delve into development for the team, development for Konohamaru as a character, which I think everyone wants to see. Udon being involved to some extent, referencing her own team, would be kind of nice. How exactly, though, will they play this? Is it just the close team member dynamic, or are they kind of hinting at closer feelings between Konohamaru and Moegi? It's hard to say. It's completely up to them. So the obvious thing here, and I think they basically set this up with a couple of pages from last time out, is Konohamaru leading Team Ino Shikacho in a fight against Matsuri. Seems super, super clear. This is the other kind of group of characters that they're obviously focusing on from Boruto's kind of generation. And it makes perfect sense for Konohamaru to kind of step in as team leader here. They're all invested in Moegi. It's perfectly set up. The only thing here is just that I do hope they find a way in the middle of all of this to use this to actually develop Moegi herself. Because this is the issue that you have here of, with the core character just trapped in a tree, unable to really do anything, how do you actually get the development you need? Like, it's the same with the Bug thing, where like the interesting thing here probably is like, what will we learn about Bug through this dynamic? Similarly, what will we learn about Moegi? Obviously, it seems like they're going for the idea that these characters have the kind of abilities of the core character. And so Wood style obviously is probably going to come into play if that is going to turn out to be a canon situation. Because that's obviously going to be a mega threat of just like Konohamaru and Team Ino Shikacho dealing with a Wood style user. That seems kind of interesting to me. Konohamaru, I guess, might have a decent counter against that because he's good at fire style. But we'll see how that ends up going. It's a really interesting prospect there. Next, we have Hidari, who is the Sasuke Divine Tree. He's obviously chosen Sarada as the target. Very obvious, going after Sasuke's daughter. Sakura could have been an option, but they haven't really used her so far in Two Blue Vortex. That's one where, like, just in terms of the dynamic in the village, I would like Sakura to get brought up at some point. And similarly, a lot of the kind of like Naruto kind of main kind of characters, I would like to see them come into play a little bit more as well. Like the parents, are they going to actually play a role? But we'll see what exactly happens. So obviously this gives Sarada a major threat to go up against. You could definitely see the idea of, do they just let Sarada face Hidari on her own? Is it Sarada and Boruto? Or is Boruto going to be more involved against Jura because of the whole Naruto situation? I'm thinking for the most part, because of what they've done so far, Boruto's connection is with his mentor, Sasuke. They're going to do it here. It's going to be a cool team up. But you almost think like these two are very, very notable. Is this a bit too much power in a way going up against Hidari? But we'll see what exactly happens here. So that's a really cool setup. This is obviously where we're probably going to see Sarada's like Mangekyo Sharingan in action against Hidari. And if they can in fact use the abilities of the source. It'll be interesting to see how that works. Like, Sasuke doesn't have the Rinnegan anymore, but because in a way time necessarily doesn't seem to mean as much to these kind of characters when it comes to this whole situation with the whole Jigen thing, will Hidari have Rinnegan powers, or is it just Sharingan powers? Interesting to see. And then we get to Jura. So this is the Jigen Ishiki Divine Tree character. We don't have direct confirmation that that is in fact who the source person is trapped in a tree for him, but it does seem likely to be Jigen based on the claw mark hair similarity. So he seems to be the most evolved member of the group. He's able to help the other three deal with their kind of growing sense of self and identity. He has chosen Naruto as his target. The exact reason, like on a personal level, maybe not super clear. It would be very understandable if it is Jigen, why that is the case, I guess. Because they're all, I say this here somewhere, don't I? Yeah, because they're all still after Boruto and Kawaki. That's why it doesn't seem like any of them choose those two specifically, because they all ultimately have these two on their list, because they're all divine trees, and these two are Otsutsuki. But, after that, I think you would probably say that, yes, I guess Ishiki would want the most revenge against Naruto, because Naruto was the one who sort of, like, in the fight, wasted most of his time, basically. But, you know, this also creates the interesting dynamic where, because everyone else believes, like, Naruto to be dead, like, very few characters know about the Naruto situation. So, him just knowing that Naruto is alive, to choose him as a target is very, very interesting, because effectively, if he announces that he's going after Naruto, that confirms to everyone else that Naruto is alive. And I'm pretty sure the details are that everyone thinks Naruto is dead because of what Kawaki said. And that's not necessarily part of the omniscience kind of thing, omnipotence thing. So that would be a thing where everyone would suddenly really doubt Kawaki just because of the situation. So he could be a big, you know, wrench in the plan for Kawaki, just him speaking. I'm guessing the idea is that this is the setup for a fight for Kawaki. Because it is Ishiki, he's after the Otsutsuki. Here is a, you know, divine tree character based on an Otsutsuki. I'm assuming that reveal will eventually come out that it is Ishiki somehow. So that's the whole situation there. And again, another thing that pairs the two up is that because his target is Naruto, Jura is going to need Kawaki to get Naruto out. Because of course, Kawaki is the one with access to the dimension that he basically put Naruto and Hinata in. So either way, there has to be some sort of a connection between these characters at some point. Again, there's opportunities to use the other characters elsewhere, like Boruto obviously has a connection to this fight and also this fight, so we'll see what way they exactly do that. A note about the whole, how it can be Jigen, is that I think this is from chapter 4. Jura says, all life on a planet, both current as well as past and long dead. As in, like, this is what we can actually suck out of a planet. Because again, the whole idea and intent of why the chakra fruit at the end of this evolves whoever eats it is that it is the entire kind of almost like evolutionary history of a planet, including the past and like where it is now. And I think this is where there's the connection with them to people from the past. Now, it's going to be a lot more complicated to explain the exact detail there in terms of like, is there a source tree for Jura that like the essence of Ishiki is in? Is this somehow in a way this weird situation where like has this somehow revived Ishiki? That if they kill Jura, is Ishiki back somehow? Or does his chakra just fade away again? Because there needs to be a bit of an explanation here, I think, because the one of the bigger questions, I've referenced it somewhere, I forget exactly where I have it, but the intent, I think, is we're setting up the fights for each of these four characters, and that basically if you kill the divine tree clone, you free whoever's trapped in the tree. That seems reasonable. Maybe it's a little bit too basic, but it seems to be a general idea of how it can happen. What happens if you kill Jura? Because Ishiki was already dead, so what actually gets freed, if anything? Or is it just that the absolute last trace essence of Ishiki goes away for good? We have to wait and see that. And then that might be where maybe Code comes into play. Like, what if Code comes across this and figures out that, wait, Ishiki's alive somehow? Code could decide, I will serve you, Jura, because you are somehow Ishiki. Not really sure how that conflicts with the overall goal that Code still has. But then that creates a weird situation for Code. Code's goal is that he wants to eat the chakra fruit himself. So he wants this group to succeed, but he has to steal the chakra fruit from them at the end, so that I suppose they don't eat it themselves, but Code eats it and becomes an Otsutsuki. And how does that work? Does that mean that, like, if they succeed and become the tree, what exactly happens then? That's the big question that I have overall. So yeah, and I mentioned that here. Yeah, their overall goal, it is said in the last chapter, is still to devour Boruto and Kawaki. Hence why neither are personal targets. They still want to evolve into what they call their final form. And basically, I suppose, drain the planet like a typical divine tree, get a chakra fruit, and go from there. The question still remains, because they do clarify, I think, in the last chapter as well, that even though we've become individual kind of thought, kind of personalities, it is specified that biologically they are all still one unit, because they're all still at their core from the same Ten Tails. So if one of them consumes like Boruto or Kawaki, do they all kind of merge into the tree at the end, or does only one of them merge into the tree? Because if they do all just go back into one and become the tree, what happens? Because then they're a tree and they'll create a fruit, but then they don't have like anything to eat the fruit with. And I'm assuming because they are evolved and they're in different forms because they have the claw marks, their final form as a tree probably would be different. Now, is it still going to be a weird thing where they're going to be in some sort of a crazy like Ten Tails kind of evolved form, and literally they can eat their own chakra fruit and evolve from there? Which, based on the way it was said before, would mean they become an Otsutsuki, which might actually be the Otsutsuki kind of origin story of just, this is like Otsutsukis are just evolved Ten Tails. We'll see how that goes. And then, yeah, Code. He still exists. He's still out there. Is he just the usual character where he's dangerous enough to cause trouble? I'm very unsure of what the plan for overall for Code is meant to be. Like I said, he's involved in this because his goal still relates to the chakra fruits. He wants them to consume Boruto or Kawaki. So is he going to find some way to side with them? Or is he just going to be sneaking around waiting for his opportunity to strike? The only one you would say he's maybe super involved with is either the Jura one or the Bug one would make sense for him to be involved with them, because he potentially also likes Ada, so he might want to defend her as well from the Bug one, but also he's obsessed with Ishiki, and so if there's an Ishiki one, he could go either way on, you basically are Ishiki now, I'll support you, or I hate you because you are trying to act like a fake Ishiki, I'm meant to be the future for the Otsutsuki. That is a complicated dynamic for him. I don't know if he has been given enough gravitas as a enemy that they're going to do too much with him, because I think most people care about a lot of other characters, in that I think he has been immediately jumped by pretty much all four of these new characters as more interesting kind of overall villains, but there is still some key dynamics with Code that do make him interesting, so don't forget about him, I suppose, is the basic idea here. And then just some quick fire things just specifically about, okay, what's actually going to be like the makeup of chapter 6. I assume addressing his status in the village will be the focus. That, like, he says he's home. Is he just going to be secretly hiding out in the village, where like Sarada and Sumbre know where he is, but no one else does? Or are they just going to kind of come out and be like, hey, we need to talk about this. There's more at play in the village. We need to discuss. Let me stay here. We can figure this out together. Kawaki's, of course, not going to like it. I can see these type of discussions happening. Like, is there going to be another Sarada Shikamaru argument? Kawaki will get involved with this. Boruto will have his say. And eventually, I think they're going to have to probably just agree that, yeah, we kind of need you. He then will need to explain stuff to everyone, what he knows about this new threat, given that he was sort of there more towards the start of these intelligent kind of trees forming. He is going to have to inform Sarada what happened to Sasuke more directly, because he doesn't exactly say what actually happened in the last chapter, of course. There needs to be a discussion here. How will she take that news? Maybe discuss with Sarada and Sumire if there is a plan to reverse the switch, like what they've been up to all of this time in the village, in the status that it's in. That's an interesting one. Because again, he's going to have an important dynamic with these two because the reverse hasn't worked on them. The Kashin Koji section of the time skip would be nice to get in the next chapter. It would make sense to a certain degree, but I can see them holding back on the kind of Kashin Koji reveals until they properly bring him back into play. I get it, we saw him like a chapter or two ago at the end of the chapter, but I don't know if you will immediately bring him back into play right now. We could be waiting a little bit for that. We have to wait and see. Will Boruto mention to everyone that he's working with Kashin Koji? If he gets to speak to Amado, might he mention it there? Because, of course, again, they did remind us in the last chapter that, like, oh yeah, Amado, Kashin Koji, like, we're kind of working together to a certain degree. So, that's an interesting one. Is it too early to properly set up the fights? Is that too quick of a pacing? Like, in terms of Konohamaru and Team 10, they're there and thereabouts. They've been kind of grouped together. We want to do something about this. But is Boruto going to, like, reveal some sort of a theory to everyone on, here's how we can save people from the trees? And that is that we have to kill the clones, and if we kill the clones, people will be freed from the trees. Well, what about the people who don't have an intelligent like divine tree person to kill? In what case is that? Is it just that you have to kill the claw grime who turned them into a tree? So you could still have the randomers who've been turned into trees be saved. It just has to be by defeating the army of claw grimes as well. Maybe there's a limitation on there can only be like the 4 intelligent ones, but the other ones are still in play in a minor way. Is it just as simple as kill the tree clone to reverse what happened here? That's an interesting one. They have been keeping Ada in play, so I'm assuming they will continue with that, especially because she is now one of the targets from the new villain group. I'm assuming that will be brought into play. So will she play a role in helping Boruto remain in the village? Maybe she forces the hand of everyone of just like, hey, if you want me to stay in line, you have to let Boruto stay here. And maybe there's some agreement where like, hey, you stay in the same house that we're living in. And that way the village just has to monitor the house that has Ada, Demon, and Boruto in it. That would be a nice solution, I think. And it would give Boruto and Ada a chance to discuss things because they're kind of working together again because Ada wants Boruto to sort of like fix her beloved Kawaki by knocking some sense into him. We'll see what happens there. And I'm assuming like there's also stuff like there because in the last chapter she got reveals about what's going on with the village because she can see them. So Ada and Boruto are going to be the main 2 people to explain to the village, I suppose, what's actually going on here, because she knows that they're intelligent enough. She knows they've all chosen targets. She is the one on the good guy side who actually knows that one of them has picked Naruto. So how much information is she going to supply here is going to be an interesting one. But I think that is everything I want to talk about in terms of speculation ahead of the next chapter. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are, some final thoughts on chapter 5, as well as what exactly you expect to happen in chapter 6. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.